In this video, we're going to go over how to create a fine-tuned GPT 3.5 turbo model using the OpenAI platform. And if you've been following the videos up to now, you should already have an OpenAI API key and have used the OpenAI API to some degree, so you should be familiar with these commands. So if you don't know what fine-tuning is, it's building on top of an existing foundational model with your own commands to create a more specific model that might be used for your own use cases. So for example, if you're creating an AI that's meant to be a newscaster or supposed to report on current events or supposed to summarize, those are all good examples of how to train a foundational model to be fine-tuned on specific instructions. Another case is you can also fine-tune it on specific information, such as providing your own company documents or providing a set of data that is specific to your organization or your use case. So what I'm going to be going over in this video is how to run through an OpenAI API fine-tuning job and how to train the model on your own data. So this is a general guide that we're going to follow. This is published by OpenAI. However, there are some big glaring obstructions, and I'm going to guide you on how to do these exact steps. Whereas they're simple on the surface, however, they can get a little tricky once you start working through the guide. So the fine-tuning steps are pretty simple at a high level. There is step one of preparing your data. This is the data that you're going to use to train the OpenAI model. And what you're basically doing is iterating on top of a foundational model. So your new version is going to be unique to you. You're going to upload these files to the OpenAI platform because the OpenAI model cannot be trained on files that don't exist on their servers. This is probably for a security issue or a security reason. I don't know the exact reasoning, but usually that is the case with these large companies or these companies. And then the third step is create a fine-tuning job, which will take a couple seconds to run. They say it should be available immediately. However, in my experience, sometimes there's some delay. And then you can use a fine-tuning model in your own conversation. And one thing that's important to note here is that these can only be used in the chat completion because you're building up GPT 3.5 Turbo, not GPT-3, which is the model used for the completion API. The chat completion is built off of 3.5, so that's a baseline API that you can use these fine-tuned models on. So let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to open up a terminal screen and also have my script open, which I will upload under the lecture, as well as the data set that we're going to be working on. And I'm going to show you really quickly what the fine-tuned data looks like. So I have a file ready, which we are going to be running with the intention of training an assistant to misspell words in the response. If you're interested in the full course of how to use OpenAI API to build AI apps and fine-tune models, I provide the course completely for free on Udemy. There's an hour and 45 minutes of learning content, and over 900 students have already signed up. And I cover topics that use OpenAI API in Python on doing things such as summarizing text, creating a translation tool, creating a chat completion tool, fine-tuning a GPT 3.5 model, and also creating a categorization tool. I have code samples on each lecture, and it's a great learning resource if you're looking to use OpenAI API to create an AI application. So that is the goal of our fine-tuned model, and this is similar to the goal in the guide uploaded by OpenAI. However, we're going to fill out this guide and get you a complete running example by the end of this video. So let's go ahead and cat this. So what we are preparing for the AI is AI training is a series of JSONs, and this is a file type called JSON-L, which just stands for JSON list, and it is a list of JSON dictionaries that contain a few prompt messages similar to the chat completion example in a previous video. So we're going to go ahead and format this JSON to sort of see what's going on, and what we're preparing is a series of messages. And one is the role of a system, a user, and assistant. So what the system is doing is providing the general baseline of what the prompt chat completion is doing. And then the user is you're asking a question to the AI, and the assistant is the proposed response that the AI should respond to that prompt message. So in this case, the system is saying the tone of you are an assistant that occasionally misspells words. The user says, tell me a story. And then as an assistant, you say one day a student went to school, but there's 3 O's instead of 2, which is misspelled, and is training the AI to do that kind of behavior in the future for an untrained prompt. So let's go ahead and show another one to sort of see what's happening. And you see here, the system message is the same. The user message is different, giving the AI a more wide variety of inputs that it might see. And you're providing the response, which is, sure, I will remind you to call your mom at 6 o'clock. And here you can see mom is misspelled to mum. And one important distinction is when you create these prompts is that you also provide context in the previous prompt, because here you misspelled mom correctly. So here is an intentional misspell and you wrote it mum. So this way you train the AI that it doesn't really matter what the meaning is. The spelling is incorrect. And this is something that is sort of slight but very helpful in creating your prompt and your data selection. Important part of this process is picking the data. This is where the bulk of the work is. So without the correct data, you are at a disadvantage. So spend time on curating the right data for the AI, because only as good as the information is working off of. So one last example, the same initial prompt. The question is navigate me to the nearest coffee shop, and then it misspelled navigated, and it has 2 Ds instead of 1. So this is just 10 examples, and I chose 10 because that is actually the minimum amount of example messages the AI requires to be fine-tuned. So you need at least 10 examples in this JSON list format. There is a convenient conversion between an array of JSONs to a JSON list that I will also include in the lecture description that you can use to make this process easier. But you need 10 examples in this JSON list format in order to upload it to OpenAI. So let's go ahead and take this and upload it to the servers. And the reasoning why we do this is because there is security issues with using an openly accessible file. So we need to upload it to their servers in order for it to work. And I'm going to create a few environment variables that I'm going to reuse in these shell commands. That makes it a little bit easier to reason and sort of read. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this one to upload it. And it looks like there is a slight issue. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. Let's go ahead and run this again. So now we get a response that looks like this. And one thing that's important to know is we need to take the file ID, and we are going to use this for the next part of this sequence. So what we take the file ID for is we need to point the training file in the next command to this file ID. So we're going to replace the training ID and the training file with this new file ID. And then notice the model that we choose. We choose GPT 3.5 Turbo, the build on 613. And we're going to go ahead and copy this and paste it back into the shell in order to start the fine training job. So this command starts the fine tuning. And when we run this command, we should get a response that looks like this. We're going to go ahead and copy it here just for convenience. And you can see that we created the job. It has an ID of ft-job dash a random string, as well as a created at timestamp and finished at null, which means that the finished at is not, this training is not done yet. And we need to wait until training is done to get the final model version that we can use for our example and our chat completion, as well as our application. So let's go ahead and get a list of the fine-tuning jobs. So here we can see all the jobs that we are running. And one thing that we want to look for is a job that we just created, which is the first one. And then we also want to look for the succeeded message. So we cannot use a model until it has succeeded. And one thing to look for is, let's move this into the JSON beautifier and let's format this. These are giving a series of events of all the things that are happening in the backend in order to build this model. So you can see here, this is a model that we started training in the previous example. And in the beginning, we went through a series of events. The first event is that it was created. The second event, it was running. And then it looks like one of the third events is that it did succeed. So let's go ahead and take this and grab the fine-tuned model ID, which is used in the next section. And we are going to go ahead and replace the model in the chat completions with the unique ID. One last thing to mention is that if you are having trouble finding your fine-tuned model in the console output, they also do send you an email with your fine-tuned model here that you can use for the last step in the previous video in order to do your custom chat completion or custom API calls. So this is a unique pointer to your fine-tuned model, and it's important to run it with this because that references the newly created file, a newly created AI model that you just made, and it will contain all of the sample messages that you sent to the AI model that you've used to fine-tune it, and then we'll build off of that in order to get a response that matches the sample data that you provided. So now that we have our completed model, we can go ahead and try the final step of our process, which is testing the fine-tuned model with the newly created, with the newly fine-tuned model and run it with a series of messages as never seen before. So let's go ahead and take this and copy it in. So what we're doing here is we're asking it, you're an assistant that occasionally misspells words. Hello, what is fine-tuning? Let's go ahead and run this model and see what happens. So then we get the response here that we can take back into the notepad just to see it in a more structured way. The response of hello, fine-tuning, which the misspell of the tuning is an extra N, is a process of making small adjustments or tweaks to something in order to improve its performance or effectiveness. So you can see here that this is using the fine-tuned model that we just created, and it is getting a result that is actually what we are looking for based on the examples that we gave it. And one thing that is good to know is that this fine-tuned model can be used in your applications, and it can be exported into different use cases. As long as you're using the same API key, you can reference this model and you can use it for your application, for a unique chatbot that you write, or even to something that reads through your company documents and provides documentation to your employees or your customers. So this covers fine tuning. Let's go to the next section.